They didn't sell heroin in back alleys. They sold it in pill bottles with a prescription. And they made billions doing it. What if I told you one single family turned a nation into addicts, then walked away richer than ever? Let me show you how it happened. This is not a story about drugs. It's about power, manipulation, and the price paid by millions for one family's empire. The Sacklers didn't set out to heal people. They set out to sell to them, no matter the cost. Today, we unravel how the opioid crisis wasn't an accident, it was engineered. And it all started in a psychiatric hospital in the 1940s. Let's get into it. They were three brothers, Arthur, Mortimer, and Raymond Sackler, working at Creedmoor Psychiatric Hospital, a cold and often cruel asylum in New York. Back then, the mentally ill were misunderstood and mistreated. Lobotomies and electroshock therapy were common, and the Sackler brothers were hands-on. But amidst all the horror, the brothers had an idea, a belief. They thought mental illness wasn't spiritual or behavioral, it was chemical. That meant, to them, the solution should also be chemical, a pill. With that idea, they bought a small pharmaceutical company called Purdue. Two brothers ran the business. But Arthur was different. He saw the real money wasn't in pills, it was in selling them. So he bought an advertising agency. Arthur Sackler didn't just blur the line between medicine and marketing. He erased it. He hired doctors to pitch drugs to other doctors, bribed FDA officials, and even invented fake medical experts to endorse products in ads. One of his biggest wins: selling tranquilizers like Valium and Librium for everyday anxiety. The drugs were addictive, but that didn't matter. Addiction wasn't the drug's fault, Arthur said. Reckless patients were to blame. Arthur died in 1987. He didn't live to see the opioid epidemic, but he built the blueprint for it. His brothers and their children, they took that blueprint and turned it into a $35 billion machine. Let's talk about their golden ticket, OxyContin. In the early 1990s, Purdue had a successful drug called MS-Contin, a morphine pill for cancer patients. It used a special time-release system, slowly releasing the drug over 12 hours. But the patent was running out, so they needed a replacement. Enter oxycodone, a powerful opioid even stronger than morphine. They simply took oxycodone, wrapped it in their time-release shell, and named it OxyContin. Now, OxyContin had its place. For terminal cancer pain or severe trauma, it worked. But the Sacklers didn't want a niche product. They wanted everyone with a bad back, a sore knee, or post-op pain to be prescribed it. Problem was, oxycodone was highly addictive, so they had to find a way to convince the world it wasn't. That's when things got really dirty. You'd think the FDA, the agency meant to protect public health, would have stopped them. Instead, Purdue got help from inside. Curtis Wright, the FDA official assigned to review OxyContin, met with Purdue execs repeatedly. They even worked together on the drug's application. Purdue literally camped out in a hotel near his office to help write it. That's not how drug approval works. That's how lobbying works. Eventually, the FDA approved OxyContin and allowed Purdue to claim it had delayed absorption believed to reduce the abuse liability. Believed by who? There was no science, no study, just vague language. That one sentence, approved by Wright, became Purdue's weapon. Sales reps would point to the label and tell doctors, "See, it's not addictive. The FDA said so." Later, Curtis Wright left the FDA and got a $370,000 a year job at Purdue. Coincidence? With FDA approval in hand, the Sacklers unleashed one of the most aggressive sales campaigns in history. Hundreds of sales reps hit the road, telling doctors that OxyContin was safe, even for long-term use. They weren't medical experts. They just memorized scripts. They claimed less than 1% of patients got addicted. But that stat came from a 5-sentence letter in a medical journal, not a study, and not even about OxyContin. Purdue paid doctors to promote the drug, sent them gifts, and took them to expensive dinners. Data showed doctors who attended these events doubled their prescriptions. And it worked. Sales exploded. By 2000, OxyContin was bringing in over $1 billion a year. Doctors were handing out 30-day prescriptions like candy. Patients got hooked fast. And once addicted, they kept coming back. For months, even years. Purdue's sales reps were raking in bonuses. There was no limit to how much they could earn. The more pills they pushed, the more they made. The higher the dose, the higher the commission. Patients started showing signs of addiction. Doctors raised concerns. Purdue's response? It wasn't addiction. It was something they called pseudo-addiction. They claimed the problem wasn't that the drug was too strong. It was that the dose was too low. If patients seemed hooked, the solution was to give them more OxyContin. That's not science. That's gaslighting. And it worked. Doctors kept increasing doses. Purdue even launched a new 160 milligrams pill, double the size of what many were already struggling with. Employees inside Purdue knew what was happening. Some begged leadership to stop. One said, "They're killing themselves with 80 milligrams. Why are we doing 160? But the answer was always the same: greed. It didn't take long for people to figure out that if you crushed an OxyContin pill, the time-release barrier vanished. What hit your bloodstream wasn't slow and steady, it was fast and euphoric. Just like heroin, OxyContin became the street drug of choice. Cheaper than heroin, easier to get, and made in a lab. It earned a new nickname, hillbilly heroin. Pills flooded communities. Teenagers got hooked. Crime spiked. Pharmacies were robbed. In some towns, over 70% of crime became drug-related. And Purdue? They pretended they had no idea. But internal emails told a different story. Executives knew exactly what was happening. They told employees to delete mentions of addiction and hide the evidence. Richard Sackler, then president of Purdue, wrote, "We need to hammer the abusers. They are the problem. They are the scum of the earth." But most of those abusers were people following their doctor's orders. People with pain. Now with an addiction. By 2007, the walls were closing in. Purdue was finally taken to court. The evidence? Mountains of it. Lies in marketing. Bribe doctors. Fake science. Cooked data. Internal memos that showed they knew the drug was being abused. At the trial, families spoke out. One mother said, "You made this drug. You lied about it. You killed my son." Purdue pled guilty. They paid a $600 million fine and admitted wrongdoing. But OxyContin made them $3 billion that same year. Executives walked free. No jail time. Bonuses and private jets waited for them afterward. And then, Purdue doubled down. They hired more sales reps, paid out millions in dividends, and sold even more pills. Nothing changed, except things were about to get even worse. After the trial, some doctors finally cut back on prescribing opioids. But by then, the damage was done. Millions were already addicted. And when prescriptions dried up, people turned to the street. Heroin, fentanyl. 4 out of 5 new heroin users started with prescription opioids like OxyContin. Withdrawal was hell. People needed something, anything, to avoid the pain. And the street drugs were cheaper, easier to get, and far more deadly. The crisis deepened. Overdoses skyrocketed. There was no exit plan. Purdue had gotten people hooked, then disappeared when they couldn't feed the habit anymore. By 2020, nearly every U.S. state had sued Purdue. The federal government reached an $8 billion settlement. That sounded like justice. But then Purdue declared bankruptcy. They said they couldn't pay the fine. How could a company that made $35 billion go broke? Because the Sacklers drained it. They moved $10 billion into offshore accounts and shell companies over the years. Purdue was an empty shell. And here's the kicker. The only way the company could pay the fine was by selling more OxyContin. That's not justice. That's a joke. Eventually, the Sacklers struck a deal. They'd pay around $6 billion only if they were guaranteed full immunity from future lawsuits. They got what they wanted. They walked away, rich, free, untouched, and never admitted doing anything wrong. Their name used to be on museum wings and university buildings. Not anymore. They claimed they were victims, that their kids' lives were being ruined by bad press. Meanwhile, over 500,000 Americans have died from opioid overdoses. Today, opioids kill more Americans than car crashes or gun violence. Let's be clear, OxyContin can help people in genuine pain. But this crisis didn't happen by accident. It was designed. A business plan built on suffering. A family who profited off pain. The Sacklers didn't just make a fortune. They made history's most lethal lie.